Today, we're visiting the beautiful and historic Abbey of Fontevraud in the heart of the Loire Valley. If you're a fan of English and French royal history, especially Plantagenet history, you will find some of your favorite historical figures with ties to this abbey, as I will share in a little bit. The abbey has been here since 1101, where it was originally built as a monastic community of monks and nuns, all under the leadership of an abbess. Fontevraud is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is the largest abbey in Europe with the largest quantity of monastic buildings in all of France, including this amazing kitchen, which we will go into later. It is a beautiful drive out to the abbey. We were staying in the Loire Valley near here, and we drove forever, and we thought we were lost. It was so remote feeling, but it's beautiful, and you can really imagine rumbling through here on horses and with wagons until you arrive at the beautiful little village. There is free parking that is just a little bit of a walk from the abbey itself. You come in through the village, and you can actually drive in to the village and onto this cobbled central area, but we felt like we shouldn't drive in, so we parked outside and walked in. We did not spend time in the actual village. If you have, I'd love to hear about it, but we kind of went straight through it and got right to the abbey, which was a big bucket list stop for me because I love Plantagenet history, and this is where Eleanor of Aquitaine, her husband Henry II, their son Richard the Lionheart, their daughter Joanna, and Joanna's son Raymond of Toulouse, as well as their daughter-in-law Isabella of Angoulême, who was John's wife and queen, were all buried here. They are not here anymore. In the mid-1100s, Henry and Eleanor spent a lot of their time at the royal residence at the nearby fortress of Chinon, which we visited in a prior video. And from there, since it was nearby, they actually sent John and Joanna, their children, here to be raised and educated for several years as young children. So it was amazing to walk through this property and imagine these people being here and their children. You know, imagine a young King John romping through this property. And I always wonder if it was during those times that Eleanor decided to be buried here. Henry actually wished to be buried elsewhere, but as it turned out, he died at nearby Chinon in 1189, and because it was July and it was hot, and this was nearby, maybe Eleanor decided that he would be buried here, but this is where he ended up, and it is where she ended up as well later on. Also, the abbess during those years was Matilda of Anjou, who incidentally was a cousin to Henry, and was the widow of the young William, who was the heir to the English throne and died when the White Ship sank off Barfleur in 1120, which basically changed the course of European history, and that is another whole story that you should definitely look up. But this gorgeous space has their effigies. These are not their tombs, but rather just their effigies. They are here in this beautiful space that looks much as it probably has for the whole 900 years. They were all originally buried here at Fontevraud, but during the Revolution, it is said that their remains were dug up and scattered and have never been found. Although I seem to recall somewhere reading that there was a story that had been said that they were actually dug up and removed and hidden somewhere and then lost to history. But wouldn't you think that the French archaeologists would be crawling all over this property if that were true? So I imagine it is true that they were not kept anywhere safe and they have been lost to us. But if you haven't read the story of the Plantagenet family, you should absolutely look it up. It's better than any soap opera. It was amazing to be here and see these really beautiful, well-preserved effigies of these amazing people who once walked these very halls. I always like to remember that they were famous and they were royals, but they were also a family and they were real people with real problems, and there was much about them that was drama and love, rebellion, revenge, tragic accidents, narrow escapes, wild rides across country dressed in disguise, murders, sorrows, and surprisingly young deaths. All of this in their story, including a rebellious heir who died young, a wife who was imprisoned for 16 years, and a sad, neglected queen who didn't rest with her husband, King Richard. And I do find that interesting. If you visit here, you will see Henry and Eleanor lying side by side, and Richard the Lionheart, but the woman lying beside Richard is not his Queen Berengaria, but is in fact his brother John's wife and widow, Queen Isabella of Angoulême. After John died, Isabella came back to France, where she was from, and she had many misadventures in a second marriage here, which culminated in her being implicated in a plot to poison the French King Louis IX. The story goes that she fled arrest for those charges and sought refuge here at Fontevraud in 1244 and then died here 2 years later in 1246. So she ended up being the effigy that is next to Richard, while Richard's wife Berengaria, who never set foot in England, is also not buried here at all, and John was not buried here either. Joanna, Eleanor and Henry's daughter, was buried here as well, but her tomb has also been destroyed and her effigy is gone. She tragically died at the age of 33 in 1199, the same year as Richard. She was fleeing her then husband Raymond of Toulouse while in the late stages of pregnancy, and she actually asked and was granted to be admitted to the Order of Fontevraud, probably because of her connections to the abbey through her family. They never would have admitted a married pregnant woman, but possibly due to Eleanor's, influence. Joanna was admitted and veiled as a nun on her deathbed, so Eleanor lost 2 of her children in the same year that year. The abbey is so serenely beautiful. You can really see why Eleanor chose to retire from royal and public life here in 1200 at a very advanced age. She died here in 1204 at the age of probably around 82. If you've never read her life story, I highly recommend it. She is just one of the coolest women in history. But to walk through these spaces and see the things that she probably would have seen and that John and Isabella and Richard and Henry have seen, this was just so evocative to be here and just sit and just be in this space. I was really moved by the visit that we had here. The abbey was actually closed in the Revolution in 1792 and then actually became a prison from 1804 to 1963. So you can see a whole World War II era and prison era part of this abbey. It actually had some executions take place here for World War II resistance fighters in France. In 1963, it was closed and given to the French Ministry of Culture, and it was transformed and reopened again to the public in 1985. If you love monastic gardens, there is a lovely recreation of monastic gardens outside on the grounds here, and there is the beautiful kitchen complex, which we were able to visit. And the rumor is that Eleanor herself may have had a hand in designing and ordering this kitchen. And one thing I did find interesting about this was that it wasn't necessarily only a kitchen, but also a smokehouse, where the famous smoked salmon and fish was made for the staple of the diet for the nuns who lived here at the time. And it is said to be one of the last remaining examples of a Romanesque kitchen in France. One thing I really found fascinating is that all these little carvings along the details of this particular kitchen on the outside of it are, every face on there is different. There's a different face, a different expression, and I love just to think of the people who were working on this at the time and all of the little details that they put into these different little faces. It was just really amazing to be here and to imagine my favorite woman from history, Eleanor of Aquitaine, in these spaces and looking at the views that we get to see here when you're here. It just felt very evocative to be here, and I highly recommend stopping here if you love Eleanor of Aquitaine and Plantagenet history in general and French history. This is a can't miss stop. There is a small cafe here. Not really a much of a cafe, but we did grab a quick coffee and we were able to sit out in the garden area and just enjoy this really beautiful and serene historic setting. I wish we had taken time to walk more through the little village, but it would definitely be worth a stroll through. If you've been, I would love to hear about the village. If you visited, if you've stayed here, let us know in the comments. Hopefully this inspires you to come and visit this beautiful abbey that has seen so much history through the centuries if you're in the Loire Valley. If you'd like to see the rest of our adventures in the Loire Valley and beyond, I will post links to those at the end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.